Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and kittens, comic book fans from all over the world. Welcome to another thrill-packed, information-loaded, curiosity-resolving episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. If I may begin with a plea to all of you, if you've subscribed, great. If you haven't subscribed, please do. YouTube has demonetized me. I don't care. I demonetized most of these episodes long ago because I didn't want to annoy you with a bunch of ads about erectile dysfunction or your car warranty. But YouTube's playing its funny games. I'm starting to lose subscribers. This doesn't make any sense at all. And I want to stay above the 10,000 mark, just as a matter of principle. So if you have not subscribed, please do. If you have subscribed, make sure they didn't cancel your subscription on you. Okay? Just a little something from me to you and you to me. That's it. Okay, let's go on with our first question. It is from Kieran Brunkard. He asks, what does a creator-owned company do? Does the creator get a fixed paycheck? Does stuff like print costs get provided? What are good examples of a creator ownership companies? Is Mad Cave Studios a good example? I don't know anything about Mad Cave. I've seen some of their output, but I don't know what their creator-owned contract looks like. For me, I've gone over this before, but I'll go over it again because it's worth talking about. The creator-owned comics really begins with Dean Mullaney. Dean Mullaney and his brother Jan created not only creator-owned comics, they created the direct comic market. They published a graphic novel back in the 70s called Saber. It was the beginning of Eclipse Comics. You could only get it through the mail. And eventually, when comic book shops began to spring up, they began direct ordering from Eclipse. And then other companies saw, hey, there's money here, money to be made. Other companies started doing it, and eventually a whole distribution system was set up to supply the comic book shops with content. It all begins with Jan and Dean at their kitchen table and a couple of $1,000 borrowed from their mom. So humble beginnings. But these guys had a dream and they made it come true, and it came true for all of us. And this was my first experience with creator-owned. Dean designed the model for a creator-owned contract. Whenever I get involved with a new company and they want to do creator-owned stuff, I always describe the terms that Dean laid out. And basically what it is in some cases, the publisher will pay the production costs. And they'll pay for the art and all the rest, and the script and what have you. And then of course that all of those negative costs must be met before any profits are split. Generally, a creator-owned contract is 50-50 split between the creators and the publisher, because the publisher's taking a risk, and so the creators get 50% of the profits, which, trust me, if the book sells any kind of numbers, is a whole lot better than what you would make with just a page rate or standard royalties, which, standard royalties like 6%, so 50%, that's a lot more than 6%. I'm terrible at math, and even I can understand that. So this was the thing that Kat and Dean, mostly Dean, offered to creator-owned, and it was for a term of 5 years that Eclipse would get the sole publishing rights for 5 years. And if at the end of that 5 years they had not reprinted it or whatever, all rights returned to the creator. But another thing they had in the contract was perfectly fair, was that you would share any ancillary rights. for those 5 years. So for 5 years, if you did Captain Potato Salad, and it became a TV show or a movie or an action figure, you would again be a 50-50 partner in that with the publisher, with Eclipse in this case. So so if a movie got made, they would get 50% of that in perpetuity because it was done in that 5-year period, that 5-year window. And just to make things absolutely clear, did a number of creator-owned things at Eclipse. And there were a couple of times the movie companies came sniffing around and they wanted the option. And generally the option was like $1,500, $2,000. It was really peanuts. But in the 80s, to a guy just starting out the comic book industry, it looked like a lot of money. But in every case, Dean cautioned against the option going through. Don't accept that option because they're not serious. It's not enough money that they're actually seriously want to make this a TV show or a movie. They're only buying the option so they can get, and they'll put it on the shelf. A lot of times he explained to us they'll buy the option to keep someone else from getting it. So he said, you may get that $2,000, but what you've really done is you've sold any real opportunity to see it get made because you've taken it off the market. And that just shows what kind of a guy Dean was, because he would have gotten 50% of that option money. And trust me, Hollywood in the 80s was throwing option money around like crazy. And if Dean were to just tell us all, yeah, go for that option, he could have made tens of thousands of dollars every year, and just off of his 50% of all of those options. But he always advised us wisely. And you don't run into a lot of guys like that in the comic book business. So the first creator-owned thing I did for them was Radio Boy, which I provided the script and I hired the artist, and all the negative costs were mine. And so it was a straight 50-50 split of the profits. And at the time, this is like 1987, this is the biggest check I'd ever seen in my life. It was a big check. I thought, wow, I need them to do more of these, but of course I never did. but I did other creator-owned projects for Eclipse, Winter World, Mad Dogs, probably a few others I can't think of off the top of my head. And all of these I own the rights to. I mean, Mad Dogs I own entirely. Winter World I own. I share copyright and ownership with Jorge Zafino's estate, his wife and son, and but all of this is made possible because of Dean, and Dean set the standard. I mean, literally set the standard, so that when Archie Goodwin comes along and he starts up Epic Comics at Marvel, which was at the time a creator-owned wing, it was trying to get some of these pros to come back to Marvel and do some high-class stuff. And Archie, I don't know if he had seen the Eclipse. He had to have seen the Eclipse contract, because the Epic contract was almost identical. All the numbers, the terms, everything else were identical to the Eclipse contract. And I know Archie knew Dean. Archie knew everybody, and Dean knew everybody. So, and Archie was always a great proponent of owning material, comic book creators having some skin in the game. And it was a noble effort, while it lasted. And some amazing stuff was done in that time period. I worked for quite a while on Alien Legion, which is a creator-owned project owned by Carl Potts and Frank Scirocco. And I, many years working on that as a hired hand. And my own Law Dog, which was created for Epic. This was after Archie left, and Carl Potts was running Epic. And Law Dog, which belongs today to me and Flynn Henry. So this is the standard creator-owned contract. Now, there's not a lot. I don't know about Mad Cave. I really don't. I'm gonna have to investigate that. I've always been interested in one of their Flash Gordon graphic novels. I gotta I gotta move that into my cart on Amazon and actually buy it because it looks really good. Um, so, um, so today the creator owned, for my money, uh, because there are other companies that claim to be creator owned, but they're not as friendly. They'll hang on to the rights past the 5-year point by claiming that they're still making sales overseas or something like that. Things you can't prove, you can't pin them down, and so they hold on to the contract and they won't let you. They won't simply release you from it. Now, big and bad and nasty as Marvel's reputation was, um, you know, they let me out of creator-owned contracts early. Like if I got a movie deal or something like that, and I could appeal to them and go, look, the movie people don't want to get involved with Marvel. Could you just let me out of the contract, please? And they would. They would. They let me out of the contract on Winter Sea, which they were supposed to publish and never did, and Law Dog and other things. So, and this probably isn't Marvel, certainly isn't Disney. This isn't Marvel at large. This was just someone in their organization in licensing who took pity on a poor comic book creator and said, yeah, kid, you can have it back. We'll just tear the contract up and pretend it never happened, okay? So yeah, there's some creator-owned companies or companies that claim to be creator-owned. And I'm not talking about Phenom. Phenom, they're terrific. I know they're open to creator-owned stuff, and I almost had a creator-owned deal with them. But it fell through for various reasons, none of it which was their fault. And but they were willing to sign a contract almost exactly like the original Eclipse contract. But today it's crowdfunding. I mean, I'm doing a project now with my buddy Graham for his amazing company, Compass Comics. So I'm currently working on a project created by me that I will own, and it'll have the same terms as Eclipse. When I do this project, if it gets made into something, Graham, gets a piece because he took the risk and he did the fulfillment, all the other stuff, all the nasty, horrible, dirty work that I don't feel like doing. I'm just too damn lazy. But Graham is a workaholic phenom, and so he'll do all that heavy lifting. I should say his wife will, because I think she really runs the business. Just between you and me, I don't think it would happen with just Graham doing it. So that's where the creator-owned realm is, and of course Eric July, who wants to really be a player, well, already is a player in the creator-owned field with his service Ripasend, in which acts very much like Epic Comics, where he welcomes in creators, and a contract very much like the Eclipse contract, and I must say, actually more liberal, more generous than the Eclipse contract. So the only thing is you've got to bring the product to it. He's not going to cover your negative costs, but that hey, you're taking a risk, he's taking a risk, and you're both sharing the benefit in the end with a profit split. But at RIP a very generous profit split. I tried to talk him into something more than that, but he wouldn't take it. He just wants content, good content. And speaking of which, Seven Deadly Sinners, a project by me and Bob C. Harden that I've talked about forever, is now being ramped up, and it will come out through Ripasend, which will be great because that way it'll reach even more readers. So you won't have to wait too much longer to see Seven Deadly Sinners, certainly by the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that one, my friends. Okay, neighbors, let's move on to Brandon Mosley. When writing a character, how do you give a character flaws that lead to consequences in the story without making a character come off as annoying, stupid, etc. to readers? How do you make sure a character is still going to be lovable to readers? I feel like when I write characters, I may be losing perspective on how they're going to come across to the reader, even though I myself love the character. Well, generally, if you love the character, the readers will love the character. If you find something in them to like and admire, that'll transfer to the readers. Now, making a character likable and relatable and all the rest of it. I mean, the biggest I mean, that's always part of writing fiction. You got to make your characters relatable and interesting, because that's what makes them interesting, their relatability. Now, I mean, the biggest task I've ever been given in comics, and the biggest weight on my shoulders, was when I was writing Tim Drake at DC. And, even though Tim Drake had been developed by Marv Wolfman and Alan Grant, and an excellent job done by both, it was up to me to take this character all the way to a monthly book eventually, a Robin monthly. And I was told in no uncertain terms that I better not drop the ball, that this character had to be likable, had to continue to be likable, and we weren't going to go the Jason Todd route. Jason Todd was a character they felt had gotten away from them. I thought a lot about Jason Todd in recent years, and I think the problem with Jason Todd, that was not a problem with Tim Drake, was Jason Todd had no character arc. He was just a snotty, opinionated little jerk, and he never grew out of that. And the story should have been him eventually coming around to seeing Batman's point of view and stop being the little punk stealing hubcaps in the street. He just never changed. Tim Drake had an ongoing arc of development of, both in his private life as Tim Drake and his, nighttime activities as Robin. He had an arc. He was learning. He was, finding things out. He was making mistakes and building upon them. And also, I kept his life in constant flux because he was one of the only Bat Universe characters who had complications with a secret identity. I mean, real complications. People that expected him to be places at certain times. So he couldn't just be Robin all the time and sleep all day. And, and there was a lot of growth and a lot of change as he continuously had to adapt. Tim Drake pretty much had an ongoing origin the entire time I wrote him, because I let the readers know this character is going somewhere. He doesn't feel he's fully Robin yet. He doesn't feel he's earned this job yet, and the whole story was about that. And I think we all feel that way. We all feel that way at times at school or at work or in relationships. Am I the person that I mean to be? Am I everything that I can be? And I think that made Tim Drake really, really relatable. It's why people fell in love with him. And same thing for Spoiler. I bring Spoiler in, and she could have been the sassy girlfriend, always putting Robin down, all that stuff. I didn't want to write that kind of character. I didn't like that kind of character. I didn't even mean for the Spoiler to become a recurring character. But once I did, I sort of built her as basically the perfect girlfriend. I mean, she shared his interests. She didn't just pretend she liked golf. She was an avid golfer, not literally, but you know what I mean. The girlfriend that pretends she likes comic books until you're actually in a serious relationship, and she tells you to stop buying all those damn comic books. So, again, building a character with a continuing arc. I've been reading a lot of Little Orphan Annie lately. This may seem like a tangent, but it isn't. In Little Orphan Annie, she's sassy and she knows stuff and she's tough and all the rest of it. Boy, she could get really annoying over the 50 years that this strip ran. 40 years, probably closer to 40 years. That kind of character could move into Wesley Crusher territory with no problem. But Harold Gray, who wrote and drew Little Orphan Annie for its entire run, he understood. We got to love this character. We got to fall in love with Little Orphan Annie, and we got to relate to her and everything else. So, there were times when she was scared, times when she was worried, times when she didn't have all the answers. He put her in the corner so many times, so many desperate situations where she was near death or Sandy was near death. That damn dog almost died 100 times in 40 years. And Sandy, which, just the dog, was a big part of it because we got to see Annie. Annie was an orphan during the Depression. And so she's guarded. She's watching out for strangers. She's very suspicious of people, which we all can relate to. And really, many, many times, the only time we got to see her real personality was with Sandy. If he was in trouble or so many times ending up at the vet hospital recovering from gunshot wounds or being run over by a car by bad guys or whatever. And we got to see her true emotions. We got to see her, vulnerable and afraid and worried and everything else. And that made us all relate to her because we've all felt that way. We've all felt lost or alone or concerned about someone that we love so much. And so, we excuse the fact that, she is a little bit of a know-it-all and she's always got the right answers eventually. And also, if you cross her, seriously cross her, you try to kill little Orphan Annie, you may as well write your obituary that day because you ain't going nowhere. The one recently that I read was she's in dire straits and she finds out this criminal gang is going to use her to help them rob this really, really rich guy's house. And it turns out the really, really rich guy is Daddy Warbucks. He's back from wherever he was. And he hasn't been able to find little Orphan Annie because she's always lost. And so she ends up with these hoods in Daddy Warbucks' house, which does not end well for them because Warbucks gets the ambush on them with the asp and all of his other armed minions. And there's this great scene where the hoods go, well, I guess you're going to turn us over to the police. And Daddy Warbucks says, I don't think we'll trouble the police with this matter. And that's the last time you ever see those guys. Daddy Warbucks took care of business. So a bit of a tangent there. But then you got characters who aren't necessarily likable, but you relate to them anyway. No one would want to go on a long car ride with Frank Castle. Or spend a 3-day weekend with Conan. Number one, you probably wouldn't survive the experience. And number two, these aren't really nice guys. We love them. We love to see what they do. We love to see them in action and everything else. But you can't really call them lovable. They're very much anti-heroes in that they're only the hero of the story because every other character in the story is so awful. It's like the Man with No Name trilogy. Clint Eastwood is the only character we can relate to in the story because everyone else is so horrible. We sort of by default have to begin to relate to him. So you've got that. I've written unlikable characters. My book Shrinkage and my Winterworld novel. In Shrinkage, Jeff, he's a jerk. I didn't like him. And in Winterworld, Scully is struggling as a young, he's like, when we join Scully, he's a teenager. It's like the before story, the prequel to the comics. And he's not very likable either because he's just fixated on survival. And while he has a bit of a heart and a bit of regret, he's doing horrible things. So how do we relate to these characters? Well, we relate to them because they're doing really interesting stuff. And if you're going to write an unlikable character, make sure they're doing really interesting stuff. Okay? Hannibal Lecter as a character had legs because he was doing interesting stuff. Horrible, awful stuff, but it kept our interest. So if you're going to write, you can't write character-driven, awful people because it wears you down. It's like, I don't want to read anymore about this guy. But if they're doing really interesting stuff to keep you engaged, you can get away with it. Now, you also have characters who are unknowable. And how do you relate to them? How do you relate to Snake Eyes? He doesn't talk. We only know him through his actions. And yeah, we approve of his actions because he's kicking Cobra ass every waking moment. And that's cool. And of course, everything about him is cool. His swords and the fact that he doesn't talk, that we never see his face, everything else. But he's unknowable. He's unknowable. So how do we relate to him? We relate to him, one, through his actions, because we approve of his actions. And two, the esteem that the other Joes hold for him. That they realize he's the biggest badass in the G.I. Joe organization. And we like him because they like him. And we like them. We like Scarlet and Duke and Stalker and all those guys. We think they're the coolest. And so if they think Snake Eyes is the coolest, then he is the coolest. And there you go. So that's how you get to know an unknowable character. Now, speaking of characters that got away from you, Anakin Skywalker. I thought a lot about this. I read this question the other day while I was putting this video together, and I kept thinking about this question. So thank you. This is a great question. Anakin Skywalker. I think most diehard Star Wars fans can agree. The prequels were terrible. The story arc was terrible. It was misguided. It was mishandled. Yes, we wanted to see young Anakin Skywalker and what turned him into Darth Vader. And but I think it was just like everything George Lucas does, it was just sort of ham-fistedly handled, just done wrong. Just high school play kind of acting and all the rest of it. First of all, introducing him as a child, enormous mistake, because you're relying on a movie, the very first movie, our first quote unquote introduction to Anakin Skywalker, pre-Darth Vader, is this child. And it's always a mistake, unless you've got a really great child actor, to have a movie rely on a child actor's performance. And most of the first movie is, the kid's obnoxious. He's not Little Orphan Annie. He's obnoxious. He's a little know-it-all. He's a Wesley Crusher. And they waste a lot of time in the movie. They're not advancing the plot toward who he is, who he will become. The pod race thing and everything else. I mean, my God, pointless. If I were to do this, and I understand George Lucas wanted to do a trilogy, but he had a beginning and he had an end, but he had this middle passage, and he just got lost. He just didn't know what to do with. There's a lot of time wasting, a lot of redundancy, a lot of boring scenes and everything else. What I would have done, how I would have structured it was, we would have met Anakin as a teenager. Hayden Christensen would have played him throughout, and you would have had Anakin as a teenager, and then moving forward. Forget the pod thing. Forget. End the movie with him joining the Jedis, or what is it, the Padawan, and all the arguments. It would be great, because the arguments would be, he's too old. We get them when they're kids. That sounds creepy, doesn't it? It's like the ninjas. You don't become a ninja at 15. They would, you would become a ninja from birth, and the Jedis, I imagine, same thing. But that would cause a complication, everything else. So and then end the first movie with the introduction of Darth Maul, the introduction of the Sith. Then the next movie basically has all the events that would have been in the second and third film. So at the end of the second film, we see him, in the volcano pit, all the rest of it. So the third film is him full on Darth Vader. It's his early days as Darth Vader. And what does he do as Darth Vader? He is the one who orders whatever it was, Order 68 or whatever, the thing to kill all the Jedis. And it's Darth Vader hunting down the Jedis. And I would end the movie, the third movie, where the first Star Wars movie begins. Him cutting his way through that door with a lightsaber, into the Rebel cruiser. And boy, that would have been a much better trilogy than all that time wasted with action that didn't advance the story and all the rest of it. And it would have made the character more likable at the beginning, because we understand, hey, he's trying to join an organization that doesn't, some of them don't want him, and he's got to prove himself, which you never really saw him do. He's got to prove himself. And then, tragedy upon tragedy, and he becomes Darth Vader. I think it would have been a hell of a... So you see what I mean? About the character needs an arc. That's what makes them likable, or at least understandable. So that was a long answer. Robbie Balfin, I wanted to ask, since you're a refined literary man yourself, and also a professed Bond film enjoyer, what would your perfect characterization of James Bond be? A more purist Fleming interpretation, or more like a specific actor's take on Bond to be a Connery, Moore, Dalton, etc., a suave cocktail assassin, or a blunt instrument of death for MI6, or maybe something in between. Well, everybody's first Bond is their favorite. My first Bond was Connery. Okay, but I'm going to argue for Connery. The Connery interpretation was terrific. He was totally believable ordering the wine. He was totally believable as a boulevardier, a bon vivant. But under that exterior was the animal. You could see it in the way he moved, particularly in the way he fought. You could see it behind his eyes. Connery is really good at this, where this guy's a super sophisticated, cocktail assassin, as you say, but we know that lurking beneath the surface when he needs to call it forward is a beast. And he is the blunt instrument. I don't like that in the later films he was all blunt instrument. He wasn't. Bond is a thinking man. He's a problem solver. He has to be to get out of the things that he gets into, and both in the books and in the movies. And I really think that Connery was absolutely the perfect choice to play this character. Now, part of your question I cut out, and it was, you mentioned something about Ian Fleming approving of Connery's casting or whatever. Ian Fleming didn't live to see any of the movies made. He never got to see Connery as Bond, but I really think he would have approved. Because, from that very first introduction at the casino, Connery owns this role, absolutely owns this role. And everyone else, there's been Bonds I've enjoyed. I really liked Pierce Brosnan as Bond. There's been Bonds I've enjoyed, but no one ever captured that feral quality that Connery had in the role, where he could be, it was believable as both, he was almost Bruce Wayne and Batman in one character, So, Jason Shepard. I read that H. Rider Haggard complained so much about Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson that someone challenged him to write a better novel. The result was King Solomon's Mines. Has there been a time when you've read someone's work and thought, I can do better than that? If so, what was your resulting work? I've talked a little bit about this before, but I actually have some new information on this one. I saw this movie, New Jack City, and it was part of, this new wave of African-American crime films. They weren't like the black exploitation films in the past. These had a little bit more of a societal conscience or whatever, trying to present, the gangster life in a more authentic way. And New Jack City, and I was really excited because I heard the plot line. And then when I watched the movie, it looked like they were really setting something up here. They had this project, if you've never lived, if you're not from the United States, or you've never lived in an urban area, a project was a low-income housing project, generally built by the city and generally populated by African Americans or other minorities. And in New Jack City, as I remember in Philadelphia, New Jack City presents these high-rise, these like skyscraper, 20-story projects, which in this movie, one of them is turned into like a fortress for a drug gang. This is where they store their drugs and weapons and everything else. This is where they hang out. This is where the police are afraid to go. This is where they protect their stuff from other gangs and all that. And the movie really built to the point where I thought, well, there's going to be this climactic siege of this place. And I love a siege story. This is going to be an awesome, like The Raid, or a great French movie, Bac des Nord. There's going to be this awesome action scene inside of this high-rise, and it never happened. It never happened. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna write that story. And so I wrote a story for Legends of the Dark Knight with Batman, and it was called The Keep, and it was a one-shot story, and Gary Kwapis drew it. And when we were done with it, DC Comics thought this is too controversial for us to publish, because they very much made, it was Batman in New Jack City. All the bad guys were African American. All the good guys were too, I might add, because the story kind of hinges on him being helped by an African American family. And so they wouldn't publish it. They paid us, but they wouldn't publish it. They felt it was too controversial at the time. And I understood their reasoning, but I didn't approve of it. I think you got to be a little more ballsy than this. You can't be, this isn't. The story's not about race. We're just trying to make it look more authentic. Because I always hated in the 80s movies where, the street gang shows up and it's like the United Colors of Benetton. It's a black guy, an Asian guy, a white guy, a Hispanic guy, and they're all in the same gang. It's like, that's not how gangs work. You don't see a lot of Germans in MS-13. There's there's not a lot of Eskimo Crips. But I said, okay, we understand you don't want to publish it. So, but some of you kind folks here, and I told the story before, said, well, why don't you tell the story now with a different character? So in an upcoming Horseman story, we will see pretty much the keep. It's got a different setting. It's got a different kind of cast and everything else. But the basic hook of the story, which I won't reveal here because it's quite a hook, it'll be a Horseman story. So look for that in probably by the end of the year. So a sort of one-shot standalone Horseman story that he basically deals with my disappointment over New Jack City, a movie I watched 35 years ago. Okay. Jason Shepard, you have recently expressed your admiration for Ed McBain and his police novels. Have you read any Joseph Wambaugh? In particular, I'm a big fan of New Centurions, following 3 LAPD officers through their first 5 years, from the academy to the Watts riots. The Blue Knight, the other end of the spectrum, of beat cops last week on the job. My favorite, the Choir Boys, a group of patrol officers and how they deal with the pressures of their job. Are you familiar and do you have an opinion? I have read every Joseph Wambaugh book, I can say, and reread a few. I've reread the Choir Boys. I've reread Echoes in the Darkness, his book about the Susan Reinhardt murder in Pennsylvania. I think I've reread that book like 4 times. His book, The Onion Field, is a true crime classic. It's The Onion Field and In Cold Blood for me as true crime classics. Onion Field, about the true story of an abduction of 2 LAPD police officers, and this crime would have repercussions through the entire judicial system, not only in California but across the country. It was as big and impactful a case as like the Lindbergh kidnapping. And it's a tremendous story told in incredible detail by Wambaugh, engaging throughout. And I would reread it, except it is such a sad story. I just can't even bear to watch the movie. It was an excellent movie. And I saw the movie, but I can't bear to rewatch it because it's just a sad story. But Wambaugh brings all of that out, the frustration, the anger. I mean, he writes this true crime story where there's all this emotional catharsis as you just get enraged at the system, at the court system, at weak-kneed individuals who won't stand up to crime and all the rest of it. And then his fiction stuff just blows me away. I've read all of his recent, he wrote a series of novels about cops on the Hollywood beat. And you mentioned Ed McBain. Well, Ed McBain wrote mysteries. I know you realize this, but maybe others don't. Wambaugh didn't write mysteries. He wrote about police procedure, but it wasn't mysteries. He would just tell stories about cops. And I love the Choir Boys. This is his catch-22. I love the Black Marble, Floaters. Oh my God! He wrote just so many tremendous books, and he really had a talent at it. And it's funny that you asked this question, because the day before this question came in, I'd watched an old episode of Columbo from 1973, and it was about the murders were involved the world of writing, and the bad guy, Jack Cassidy, who had just killed Mickey Spillane in the story. God, I love Columbo. Jack Cassidy asked Columbo, did you ever think of writing your story? And Columbo says, yeah, well, there's a sergeant in our department. He's had some success writing, but he's just a sergeant. And of course, it was a reference to Wamba, who was a police detective sergeant. I think he worked vice for a while. He worked burglary. I don't think he ever made it up to robbery homicide, which is the big show in the LAPD before, he basically left to have an incredible career as both a novelist and a screenwriter and a TV producer. Police Story, TV show I never missed Police Story. So, yeah, I read a whole bunch of Wamba. I think I've read every word he's ever written. Very, very talented guy. Extremely talented guy. Jason Shepard again. Why didn't I give you a twin spin? I don't know, Jason. I owe you one. What is your opinion of swear words in fiction? I feel like they are a necessary evil. Sometimes you want to accelerate, convey how people talk. Sometimes you need them for the right emphasis. Rhett Butler saying, frankly, my dear, frankly, my dear, I don't care, doesn't work as well, does it? But as in real life, I feel an excessive swearing can come across as just performance art, or it just becomes noise. When you write, is the use of swearing something you give much attention to? Yeah, I mean, frankly, I don't give a damn. One of the greatest lines ever in fiction was shocking at the time. It's hard to believe now. Shocking, and then they had to include it in the movie. Lots of discussion. Can we include that word? We have to, because everyone who read the novel knows that line. Whatever. I remember years ago, Florence King, who used to write for National Review before she passed, she wrote an article about political correctness and how they wanted to rewrite literature. They wanted to rewrite famous books in the light of political correctness. And she said, so what are they going to do? They're going to have Rhett Butler say, frankly, my dear, that doesn't impact me. So yeah, every once in a while, a curse word is a good thing to have. I try not to overuse them. I remember when, both comic companies, Marvel and DC, launched more adult lines, and a lot of writers said, I can write better if I can use 4-letter words. Well, if you need 4-letter words to write better, you need to get a new job. There's ways to convey this stuff, ways to convey this meaning. For my own thing, I've told the story before. When I wrote the book 7 Block, there's a scene where I had a character tell another character to go F himself. And Eclipse at the time said, well, we don't want to use the F word. That's a step too far. We're not ready for that. Can you take that line out? Which I did. And when Jorge Safino got the script, that line was gone. But Jorge understood that moment needed that kind of phrasing. And so in that scene, he has that character give the other character the middle finger. So he accomplished visually what I was trying to do in dialogue. So that's how simpatico he and I were. It's kind of spooky, isn't it? But yeah, I don't, I use them in my prose novels. I rarely use anything like this in comics, even if I'm given the opportunity. Because it just doesn't feel right to me. But in prose, yeah. But I try not to overuse it and just use it, sparingly. So if you read the Levon Cade novels, you'll know that he rarely ever curses, because he's that kind of dude. Everyone around him curses, but he doesn't. And actually, I get more trouble for using the N-word than I do cursing, because everybody's just so used to it. I mean, you watch the news anymore, and everything's getting bleeped out. It's like the hippest thing in the world for politicians to start dropping F-bombs. And it's all, as you said, performance art. I mean, that's all show. I mean, why weren't you doing this before? Now, you got a memo, you got an email. Let's start cussing up a storm so people can relate to us. Anyway, little editorial comment there. Kane Dorr. Question. If Denny strongly opposed allowing Dick to go over to the Titans, how did Marv make it happen? What do you know about Marv's side of the street and getting Dick over there? How did Denny react when it happened? Please feel free to go on a tangent. It simply happened because Denny wasn't there. He was over at Marvel working on Iron Man, stuff like that. So he was working at Marvel. He didn't know. I'm sure he found out. I'm sure even though he was working at Marvel at the time, I'm sure he was a little bit pissed that they took, basically took Nightwing to space, made him part of this, group of kids. But you can certainly see why Marvel wanted to do it. He wanted a, central figure that everybody knew. I mean, the Teen Titans without Robin. I mean, Robin had been a member of the Teen Titans in the '60s, so it just made sense he would be a member in the '80s, and so Marvel wanted that central figure, and I'm sure Teen Titans without Robin or Nightwing would not have sold as well as it did with Dick Grayson in it. So, there was a commercial reason for doing that as well. And Teen Titans was a huge seller for DC at the time, so they weren't going to mess with that. But, when Denny got back, it was like, okay, it's time to bring Dick Grayson home to Gotham. And, it took a while because I don't think Marv was at DC. Well, he wasn't at DC as an editor, certainly. But, they must have made some sort of deal, or whoever ran the Teen Titans office was loath to give it up. But I know Denny worked very, very hard to pull Dick Grayson out of the grasp of the Teen Titans. Joshua Ignatowski, he's back. He's back, my friends. Never fear. He's in the neighborhood. He asks, what's a particular Critical Drinker video you've really enjoyed and why? Well, I laugh at all of them. I can't really pick one out that I've really liked. I mean, I will watch all of them. I like Critical Drinker. He's funny, but more importantly, he has a very, very incisive commentary to make about storytelling, not just about the movie business or the TV business, but about storytelling and character development and things like that. And the things he says, I'm just sort of nodding in agreement. He's affirming my own beliefs for the most part. Now, I don't like every movie that he likes. There's a few movies that he reveres I absolutely cannot stand. And there's other movies that he doesn't like that I really enjoy, that I think are good films. Maybe someday the two of us can get together and hash that out, or not. I have enough arguments with Graham Nolan over what makes a good movie or not. So I don't need to get in a fight with, the most visible film critic in the universe at the moment. So I really like Critical Drinker. I like another YouTube channel called Movie Wise. It's this guy with this unidentifiable accent, but he's incredible. It's called Movie Wise, spelt the way it sounds, all one word. And the guy, he does a lot of what Critical Drinker does, except in greater depth. And he'll go back to classic movies, and he'll show you how scenes are blocked out and how characters are developed. And again, I don't agree with him about every one of his movie favorites, but he did a whole video picking out lines of dialogue, exchanges of dialogue, and what was so great about them and why they were so important to the story. And if you want to understand storytelling, if you want to get really granular with this stuff, check out Movie Wise. Another YouTube thing I watch a lot is Pitch Meeting. And again, they're being silly and funny and goofy and really, really hard on the movie industry. But they're also giving great commentary on character development, plot development, blocking out of scenes, all that stuff. And you can learn a lot. I mean, you're laughing along with these guys. Critical Drinker and this guy. Movie-wise, a little bit more serious, although he's funny too. You're laughing along with these guys, but you're learning as well. Stuff about, what failed. I mean, you can watch a movie you liked and watch Pitch Meeting and see it torn to shreds and realize, oh my God, this is all smoke and mirrors. This movie was made out of tissue paper. It doesn't stand up to these two guys making fun of it. There's some movies that I like and I won't watch the Pitch Meeting because I don't want to know. I don't want my illusions destroyed. I want to still think Santa Claus is coming. There you go. Twin spin. Of course, Joshua gets a twin spin. He's always getting twin spins. He won't share them either. Jason Shepard can tell you about that. Okay. Joshua's back with, is there any particular book you believe is better experienced in audiobook format, more so than written format? If so, which ones and why? Uh, PG Woodhouse. I'm sorry. I love PG Woodhouse, but the audiobooks are so much better because it's, most of the PG Woodhouse audiobooks, they're not even audiobooks, not just some guy reading it, it's some guy performing it. Jonathan Cecil or Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry did a whole bunch of audiobooks of PG Woodhouse recently. And you can feel the love coming from these guys for the material. And plus, they got all the accents, all the regional accents, the Midland accent, the Cockney accent, and the posh accent, and they get them all right. And it's so much richer in experience than just reading the books. Reading Woodhouse is amazing. He's fantastic, one of my favorite writers ever. But the audio thing, it's so much better. It's so much better. And I've listened to these books over and over and over again. This is my default audiobooks are PG Woodhouse. So yeah, I'm going to listen to Laughing Gas again. I'm going to listen to Ring for Jeeves again because I love it every time. The other ones are the Flashman books for the same reason. The Flashman books are, you want to get someone with gets the accents right and everything else. Although I reread the Flashman books all the time. Flashman at the Charge I've reread. As regular listeners know, I've reread Flashman at the Charge like every year for the last 20 years. I reread it because I love that book. Triple spin for Joshua. Here it comes, coming down the line. Joshua, he asks, if you had to guess, what do you think Bane's preferred type of beverage might be? And how much alcohol, if any significant amounts, do you think he consumes? I think alcohol would be a contraindication for Venom. I don't think you'd want to be on Venom and be drinking Jello shots. Beer's out of the question. The guy likes to watch his weight. I think Bane, if you ever see Bane, it's going to be Fiji water or a protein shake. Heavy on the creatine and collagen, and 6 raw eggs in there, and some spinach, just in case Popeye was right. So he's a teetotaler. Mr. Bane is Senior Bane. Rex Moss. How many ongoing series do you think Joe Bennett can draw at a time? Is Alpha Core and Horseman likely to max him out? Do you think he could do a Zalen ongoing series as well? Surely he's not that prolific. Yeah, you look at the level of this guy's artwork, and I'm just stunned at how much he can put out. I mean, this is incredible. This guy's a machine. And then, on top of the work he's doing with me, he's doing commissions, he's doing stuff for Kingstone. I mean, just incredible talent. And no wonder people say this has to be AI. No, it ain't AI. This guy, I guess he just never sleeps. Or either that or he's triplets. I don't. Joe, how do you do it? Please let us know. He's leading a double life all on his own. He's doing Horseman. He's doing Alpha Core on a regular basis. Zalen, we'll see. I can see some Zalen one shots. I don't see a Zalen ongoing. That's just in my mind. Of course, if you folks demand a Zalen ongoing, we're going to have to figure out how to do that. I always joke when we're in Zoom meetings with Ripa about our different tasks. What are you doing? What are you doing here? What are you doing there? And I always say my job is just to keep Joe busy. And trust me, I got to write something every month to stay ahead of him. And these aren't short, projects. I mean, I just wrote a 50-page Horseman story for him that he'll get after he's done Alpha Core 2. And as I see him getting toward the end of Alpha Core 2, I will write Alpha Core 3, because then he'll be moving on to that Horseman thing. So, but it's fun. It's fun, working with the same guy where we're sort of telling this big story that crosses over between Alpha Core and Horseman. Although each thing can be read independently, they all join together to tell a larger story. It's like I guess the equivalent of like a 6-issue arc in a regular comic. So yeah, I don't know how he does it. I can't answer your question. Hey, twin spin. You got a twin spin, and all the dogs are happy. Rex Moss again. You make characters sympathetic very quickly. How did you so quickly generate such sympathy for Magneto the policeman in Alpha Core #1? I think you're referring to Officer Wilkins. This is a good example of when I always say, if you've heard me say this before, every scene should serve two purposes. And this scene in which Ingrid Valdez meets Officer Wilkins serves many purposes. Wilkins is just a regular uniform cop, or so we think. He's got a little bit of a surprise later on in the story. And he has to drive Ingrid Valdez around. We have the scene where he has to drive her around because she doesn't fly. You know, Braxwell and Solari, they fly. So she's got to basically drive or be driven to wherever their rendezvous is or whatever, or driven away from the crime scene. And this scene is about her being kind of pissed about that. You know, that she's not seen as equals to her partners in Alpha Core because she can't fly. And she's kind of feeling humiliated and demeaned by having to be driven around. And this Officer Wilkins ain't making it any better in this scene. And he's asking her questions and stuff. And he's obviously a fanboy. Now, that's the first thing that makes us relate to him. You, me, and every other fanboy reading Alpha Core 1, we relate to Wilkins because we would be Wilkins in this situation. We're meeting an actual superhero and we're asking them questions about and trying to, explore further their world. We're trying to satisfy our curiosity about this person who is more than human. And Ingrid doesn't want to have any of that. She's gone from being humiliated to pissed off at Wilkins. And here's the thing. So we're exploring Ingrid's inner thoughts. And then we're introducing Wilkins, which you don't know if you're reading it, that this guy's going to play a major part in the story later on. He seems to be introduced just as a comic foil, just as a character for Ingrid to talk to. That's what it seems. This does not seem like a setup scene, okay? But it is a setup scene. So we're exploring Ingrid's emotional level. It's funny. That's the other purpose. The third one is it's setting up Wilkins for something more. And if you've read it, you know Wilkins plays a major part toward the end of the book. And if you haven't read it and you're watching this, I've sort of spoiled it. But anyway, that's what it is. Now you say, now how did you do that? I don't know. It's just like, I'm writing a story. It's like making a cake. I got to put in the eggs. I got to, mix the dry mix, the flour, the salt, the sugar. I got to do this, got to do that. What did I forget? Is there something else that goes into a cake? Did I forget something? And when the cake comes out of the oven, it's going to be flat or taste awful or whatever. Did I add too much of this, too little of that? Writing a story, professionally written story, not literature, not whatever, a professionally written story meant to entertain. You've got to know what to include and what to leave out and how much of this and how much of that. And when you're doing a setup, you got to make sure the reader doesn't know it's a setup. So when setting up Wilkins, it doesn't appear to be a setup because the scene to the reader seems to serve another purpose. Even if they're not articulating it, they're getting it. That, yeah, Ingrid's talking. It's funny. This is a little exchange. We're getting a little glimpse because, giving her some screen time, getting a little glimpse into her psyche and everything else. But yeah, it was all that, but it would have ramifications later. Because when you're setting up, a setup is the epitome of invisible handwriting, of hiding the fact from your reader that you're telling them a story. You're not telling them a story. They're experiencing a story. Okay, no one's telling it to them. They're experiencing it as they read it. Okay, there's nobody behind the curtain, even though there is. If you understand what I mean, that's invisible handwriting. And and I know, we all know, because we're consumers of literature, we're consumers of film and television. We understand the language of these things. And even if you can't articulate it, even if you don't understand it, even if you just intuited it, you know when it sucks and when it doesn't. You know a setup when it's coming. And my least favorite setup of all time in one of my least favorite films is Jeff Goldblum's gymnast daughter in The Lost World. I know I've said this before, but I just can't get off this movie. It's the audience groaned when this character was introduced. Not when the girl was introduced, but when we saw that she was a gymnast. And the movie spent way too much time showing you she was proficient at gymnastics. The audience groaned. Everybody groaned because you knew this is an eye-rolling moment. She's gonna, he's gonna go along with her, and there's gonna be some gymnastics that help save the day from the dinosaurs before the end of the movie. And of course there was. This lazy, lazy, lazy writing. I mean, do you see the difference between this? I'm not tooting my own horn here, but there's a difference between how this character is introduced. First of all, she's a pointless character. She's not needed in the story at all. They just thought, I don't know what they thought. But you see the difference between this scene and the scene where Wilkins and Ingrid are in the car. It's night and day. The difference between the way I set something up and the way, I think it's David Koepp, one of my least favorite screenwriters of all time, who must have an awesome agent. It's the only thing that explains it. In the way Koepp approaches this ridiculous scene. So, hey, if you have suggestions or questions or any of that kind of stuff, please get a hold of me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com is the most reliable way for your questions to reach me. And I want to thank all of you. Man, I'm up, 243 episodes? I thought I'd run out of things to say long ago, but you people keep finding questions to ask. And I think it's pretty obvious over the last few months, I've been delving deeper and deeper into your questions. I mean, you'll ask a question and then you'll ask a further question. I feel like I'm being cross-examined here, but trust me, I'm enjoying every minute. So awesome questions. I thank God for my thoughtful fans. I think I've got some of the smartest people reading my stuff, which humbles me. Because I don't think I'm that smart. But you people seem to enjoy it. So anyway, I want to thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for checking to make sure you're still subscribed. If you would please do that. And I will see all of you down the road.